All right. Well, thank you very much, Ian, and welcome everyone. I don't want to start with too much of a preamble before I bring the OEM panel out, but certainly, thanks all for joining us here in Columbus for seminar 73, and that's just about the end of my preamble. So we've got a very good panel, and we certainly appreciate the OEMs who are coming to speak today. I'm going to give a very short introduction of who they are. We do have bios for everybody on the agenda on the website. So if you want to learn more about the speakers, don't hesitate to do a couple clicks. The first person I'd like to introduce is T.J. Reed, who is the president and CEO of Daimler Specialty Vehicles. Next, I would like to bring out Sean Kenny, who is the CEO of Hyundai Translead. And finally, and I'll exchange places at the podium with him, is Charles Chilton, Vice President and General Manager of IC Bus Division of International Motors. So with that, Charles. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Honored to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So just a quick introduction of myself. Today I'll go over kind of my introduction, kind of what's going on with International Motors, as well as kind of a teaser for our industry and outlook, kind of the topics we kind of see how we think about that. So from an introduction of myself, interesting picture from my high school picture book. See there on the right there, the IC logo? That's me. School bus driver in North Carolina 40 years ago. So kind of come full circle for me being a school bus driver to sitting here at the podium today representing one of the leading brands in North America. So pretty exciting for me. So another kind of news, in case you don't follow the news, this year International Navistar is no longer a company. We was acquired by Traton, and now we've kind of rebranded ourselves this year as International Motors, and IC Bus is also a sub-brand of International going forward. So it's a little news there, in case you don't hear the term Navistar anymore, you hear International Motors, so you kind of know we're talking about the same thing, back to our heritage from a long time ago. So, and Lyle's, from my perspective, we have multiple locations around the country, North America, but very proud since 2001 to be building school buses in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and and we're approaching 250,000 school buses produced there, U.S.-made product, and very proud of that. And on the screen you can see where the other locations are for International. So, industry outlook and update. It's not a very simple question to answer these days. I think if it was, we probably have a lot more outlook going on, but I think the purpose of this slide, I'm not going to go into the details because we have kind of these questions covered in the panel discussion today, but really it's what segment are you in? Are you in the bus industry? Are you in the Class 6, 7? Are you in the Class 8 on highway? Or are you in the vocational? So each segment itself is looking at different areas of the economy for different reasons. And it's kind of interesting that, the school bus side is really kind of one of the bright spots now in the commercial vehicle industry, strong backlog. It's property tax based, and really we haven't been able to keep up with demand, so the school bus industry is doing okay. However, when you look at Class 6, 7, medium duty product, we have a high inventory levels, some of the highest historical levels still out there, and it's really dependent on customer confidence and how the housing market is doing and et cetera. So all those things are kind of, as we know, kind of moving sideways at this point. But really, we have an inventory problem as an industry, which is kind of pacing new production. Even though we're selling product, it's kind of being consumed from inventory more than new production. And on highway, it's all about freight demand. I mean, we are in a freight recession, and which lowers rates and which lowers the ability for freight movers to actually purchase trucks. So that's kind of the nature we're in right now. They're again kind of moving sideways with all the uncertainties we're dealing with. Vocational, infrastructure-based, interest rates-based, and we know what that's like at this point. So I just kind of want to give that kind of as a teaser as we go into this starting out, as I'm sure we'll get into these discussions today as a panel. And the school bus side, a little more deeper dive. As you can see from the chart on the left, 160,000 diesel buses are more than 15 years old. This kind of reinforces there is a replacement demand cycle that's still apparent in the industry. And you look at that, that means at least from a replacement perspective, 30,000 buses are needed over the next 5 years, just trying to catch back up. And on the chart there in the middle of the page kind of shows how we're doing versus the pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, as well as when it comes to pre-tax property tax revenues, which are driving the school bus demand and the funding sources. But that said, we are still, even though the school bus industry is strong as it is, we still buy from the same suppliers, same supply base, and that supply base itself is now challenged. That kind of goes, the trucking industry is down. So we're dealing with, even with the school bus space, there could be supply constraints. Not because we don't have a demand, just because the whole industry is kind of struggling at this point. So more discussions on that in the panel discussion. So that said, I'd like to turn it over to Kenny. All right, Sean?
I think so.
Ooh, into the light. Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. Depends on your time zone. My name is Sean Kenny. I've been in my third year as CEO of Hyundai Translead, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Personally, I'm actually an engineer, classically schooled in aerospace and mechanical engineering. Got my start in the aerospace industry with McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, and then made my way into the metrology industry, and then this wonderful world we call trailing equipment, most recently with Wabash National and now with Hyundai Translead. So this morning, what I thought I might do is just share with you a little bit of an introduction on Hyundai Translead, because there's the part that many know, which is the trailing equipment side, and then there's other parts of the business that people aren't necessarily aware of. And then maybe I thought it might be interesting to hear what we've been doing to navigate the waters that we've been in. Certainly no surprise to anyone that we're in a little bit of a downturn of a cycle. So what do you do when you're faced with that? How have we managed through it, and where have we focused? And then maybe during the conversation here, we'll get into a little bit more of the market discussion as we go. So first of all, we are part of the Hyundai Motor Group, as many can probably tell by our namesake. We are part of the larger organization over in transportation equipment on the left. I actually report up through the Hyundai Motors of North America organization through a gentleman named Randy Parker, who is the CEO of Hyundai Motors North America. So we are definitely, over the past 3 years, have become more and more part of the automotive side of the business. Before we were operated separately through their global operations division, or I like to say God. That's who we reported to. So yeah, 313,000 employees across the globe. A couple little fun facts that people don't know. Hyundai Motor Group actually feeds every employee lunch every day across the globe. So that is something that they pride themselves on. They want everyone to have a good meal. And so yeah, meals for everyone every single day of the year. In terms of the business, of course, there's the trailing equipment business that consists of the dry vans, the refrigerated vans, flatbed, dollies, and chassis. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about chassis when we have this panel conversation. But a new entry for us this year is actually the Onza truck body. So we have entered the truck body space. Those are very familiar if you're in this industry and you know our name. The part that's not as familiar is the automotive die casting business and the powertrain business. Quietly, we have a separate plant down in Mexico that actually builds a little over 1 million a year transmission cases, engine blocks, and engine heads in our die casting plant. And then we also have a powertrain business that builds over 100,000 engines and 40,000 transmissions a year, all under the Hyundai Translead umbrella, serving our U.S. automotive partner and head company here in the U.S. for both Kia and Hyundai. All of these plants, we have 5 in total in Mexico, between 4 in Tijuana and 1 in Rosarito. So it's quite a big operation for what we do. Relative to navigating the waters, so we've focused on a number of things. We've tried to focus on people, process, and product through this time. thinking that that was really the way forward. Now, in terms of people, not only retaining people, as we went through, as many of you did, we went through a period of time where everybody was either quitting or quiet quitting, right? So we focused on retention, we focused on benefits, we focused on some flexibility. One thing you might ask, are you back to work? Kind of. We are still in a hybrid, but we are in a return to work mode. And you know, we have continued to focus on gradually easing that back, because in San Diego there's a lot of traffic, and people really kind of got used to working from home, quite frankly. So we're working through that. Other areas in terms of process. So we have worked through optimizing processes. We learned a lot through the supply chain crisis. You know, we never try to let those things go unlearned from. And you know, situations like we went through in 22 and 23 as a global community really taught us a lot about our processes, specifically in the supply chain arena, and just how fragile they were and how prone we were to breaking through all that. Last but not least, I'll just hit on the products. So this year at TMC, we had a very large booth, very great presence, wonderful trade show this year. The interesting thing was there wasn't anything in our booth that wasn't new. Everything was new. So through this period, we've leveraged this time to really double tap on some of these new products and new processes that have come out, and we're excited to bring them to market. They are growing and they are scaling well, and hopefully what we'll hear is for an upturn here in the not too distant future where we can reap the benefits. So with that, TJ, I'll bring you up. Thank you all. Good stuff. So much for you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Ken, thanks for the invite. Really excited to be here and been looking forward to the panel. So again, TJ Reed, President and CEO of Daimler Truck Specialty Vehicles. So going on my 27th year in the industry, of which probably more than 20 have been at Daimler. Also spent 6 years working at Meritor, so I ran the North American brake business as well as the electrification business before the end of my tenure there, but been in this role for just a little over a year. What I wanted to do, kind of first give you an overview of the business, specialty vehicles. So within DTNA, the specialty vehicle business unit is a standalone business unit, so we represent two very iconic brands, Thomas Built Buses as well as Freightliner Custom Chassis, and Daimler acquired both of those businesses back in the mid-90s. And over the last 30 years, they have been, I would say, very interdependent, working very closely together, but managed independently. So as you can imagine, you know, over the years, there's some inefficiencies that come with that. But last year, we actually consolidated both of those brands under one umbrella, under specialty vehicles. So we're kind of rolling that out as we go right now. To tell you a little bit about our footprint and our products, and I'll kind of start on the Freightliner Custom Chassis side. So Freightliner Custom Chassis is based out of Gaffney, South Carolina. And in Gaffney, we design and manufacture strip chassis for walk-in van, RVs. We also do cabin chassis variant for shuttle bus and RV. Being here in Indiana, this is the heart of RV land, so a lot of our chassis are coming up this way. But also, we do chassis for school buses, so we do them for Thomas Bus. 125 miles up I-85 in High Point, North Carolina. That's the home of Thomas Bus. Thomas is, for all intents and purposes, is a bodybuilder, so we design and manufacture bus bodies, both commercial and school bus. So we have a full portfolio, Type A, Type C, and Type D. And when you zoom out and look at our role within Daimler Truck North America, specialty vehicles is 100% medium duty, so we don't have any heavy duty product. We account for anywhere from 1/3 to 40% of DTNA's medium duty market share. And what I like to say is special about specialty vehicles is, you know, what's different from the truck business. Our payload for the most part is people. So we get you early in life, taking you to school on a Thomas Built bus. We touch later in life, potentially in your golden years as you're living your dream, touring the country in an RV, and in between, certainly help deliver all your stuff with e-commerce, last mile, walk-in van. So a little bit of a spin on our tagline, how we keep the world moving. For our outlook, and I think this is why we're all here too, it's what's the saying, may you live in interesting times, and we are certainly in those. And I'll kind of talk to the three, I would say, disparate markets that we participate in. And the demand drivers are very unique and sometimes counter-cyclical to the truck market. But again, right now, the old, I would say, crystal ball is a little bit murky. So we look at the world in scenarios. And in those scenarios, we have a base case and then also alternatives. So we certainly want to be light on our feet and be able to react as a lot of these changes come at us. But as I kind of first start with the FCCC products on RV and walk-in van, and these indicators are more of a optimism, I would say, gauge versus a volume gauge. So, and it changes quite often. But on the RV and walk-in van side, we're coming down from absolute peak production at the end of COVID. So 2021, a lot of discretionary income floating around out there. Again, people were buying, we were all buying a lot of stuff to come to our houses, right, at e-commerce. A lot of people wanted to get out of the house and bought an RV and started seeing the country. So those volumes in both those markets are down roughly 50% from that time period. And they've been kind of, I would say, bouncing along here. We're not even back to recovery mode yet. Specifically to RVs, as you can imagine, very sensitive to interest rates. And it makes a lot of sense. You basically have a house on wheels. So there's a good correlation there. Our outlook for the next 18 months, it's probably more of a pull strategy versus a push. With, I would say, a bit more tepid demand, order boards a little bit shorter. Dealers aren't interested in certainly these large floor plan expenses and having a lot of inventory they can build relatively for a customer to suit and deliver in a relatively decent time frame. So we think that's going to persist through the end of this year, well into next year, and hopefully we start to see some stability in interest rates and some rate cuts to help move things along. On the walk-in van side, again, coming off those peaks, and really as we've kind of normalized our buying habits at home, the large parcel carriers have been kind of, I would say, right-sizing their fleet and still kind of working through that as we speak. The consumer, the health of the consumer is a big driver in this business, so we're going to be really focused on how this holiday season goes. And again, as we get into next year, hopefully we start to see a bit of a rebound, but we think more of the same there. And the bright spot, as Charles mentioned, is school bus. School bus continues to have very stable demand. There's a lot of, I would say, unmet needs from the customer base, very strong backlog. So, we'll talk a lot about that, but that certainly is a bright spot in the industry. So for us, of our three markets, it would be great if they were all three hitting on all cylinders at the same time. But again, I think, for the first two, it's kind of a wait and see mode, and we'll power through, but school bus continues to be strong. So look forward to the apparel.
All right, well, thank you very much, TJ, and Sean and Charles. If I can ask you to take these chairs, we're gonna slide them over a little bit. It was determined that we would look better not hiding behind the. Let's see,
But much more comfortable.
all right. Thank you, gentlemen. So I guess as preface to our discussion, I do want to note that we prefer thinking of demand or thinking of our markets in terms of kind of classic supply and demand, and that's really kind of what how we've always worked, and unfortunately politics has kind of interjected itself into our lane a little bit more than usual. So it's unfortunately, it's kind of the reality we're all dealing with right now. But maybe Sean, starting with you on the outside and working our way down. If you could touch on the current state of the market. Maybe just starting there. Current state of the market. As you see it in the trailer space.
So in the trailing equipment space, it obviously is not good. I think the dry van space is very tentative, but the other spaces are as well. Last year we actually, in terms of reefers, we actually grew in a down market, which is a little odd. It was to look at reefers, for example, as a single monolithic structure is maybe missing something. We grew last year in multi-temp operations. That's the source of our growth. It was the single temp operation that was really down. Now this year, we were hoping to see that come back, but clearly it has not. And in fact, I think the multi-temp operations pulled back as well. Much of that has to do with consumer demand. I think people are, while we see them spending on big ticket items, I think they are pulling back their spending on things like going out to eat. You know, you just have to go out and buy breakfast. We just went down the street, and I think it was like $35 for two people, right? So I think we're seeing that, and I think our multi-temp customers are feeling that. In the dry van space, though, definitely feeling the supply and demand imbalance. Quite the opposite of what we saw just a few years ago, where we couldn't build enough. But you know, as we look in such an atypical year, you know, I guess no year's the same, but in such an atypical year, there are some things that are holding typical. Years ago, we did a study, and we kind of looked at specifically in the dry van space and said, you know, by the end of May, we will have sold about 95% of what we would build. So in other words, in terms of incoming orders and everything else, by the end of May, we were at about 95% of what we would do for the year. And that does seem to be holding true. There's not a tremendous amount of business, so at least something typical in an atypical time frame. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Charles?
Yeah, so I was just speaking from the school bus industry in this perspective. As I mentioned, it was a spotlight, and we all started this year with a fairly strong backlog. And that's good and bad from one side. It's very good from an OEM perspective. You know what you're building, you can plan accordingly, but it's also not good for our customers because the product's not being delivered in a timely fashion. So as we kind of go through this year, going into 2026, looking at us, we're trying to get back to a normal situation for our customers so we can deliver in a more reasonable expected time. So that's in the school bus space. And then on top of that, the 26 has got a potential to be an even higher demand year if we look at maybe what's going to be happening in 2027 with other changes in the cost structure for product going into 27. So it's kind of we're in that point in the marketplace where we're trying to get back to a normal situation. We may very quickly get back to unnormal because of just the other market dynamics. And of course, not my swim lane, but just commentary around the on-highway market. It's just we are seeing everything's kind of moving sideways. We were expecting a little pre-buy. Pre-buy's not happening. Deferring, waiting. And really it's kind of boiling down to trying to get some certainty in the economy of the factors around physical, monetary policies, et cetera, that are kind of driving people to kind of wait and see. But there again, at some point, been in this industry for quite a while, we know it's going to come back. The question everybody's asking is, well, what am I looking at to know when it comes back? And so it's, there'll probably be a light switch in effect, and we'll be challenged again on the other side of the equation, on the supply side.
So that seems to be the way we roll in this industry, yeah. TJ?
Yeah, maybe just to tag on a few things to what Charles said. Yeah, I think as we've exited COVID on the school bus market, great slide to show kind of what the gap is, and we're kind of on the back foot to get caught up. So there was urgent demand replacement. I think, yeah, the theme going forward is like how to get back to an orderly cadence, right? And still a lot of demand out there, but we're producing kind of at a stable rate. So that's a nice thing, I think, for any manufacturer want to be able to do and meet customer expectation as well. What I'd say on the other parts of our business for let's start with RV again, that's you don't need an RV. Some people do, but technically I guess you don't. It's not a business tool, so there's a lot of factors that need to come into that, right? If there's a lot of disposable income, people are confident, there's a cost factor to that with interest rates, but we also see shifting demographics and tastes, right? So some of those things are structural. When we look at, a Type A diesel pusher moving to a Type C, which is more a cab and chassis, so there's a preference to that. Or if there's somebody now entering the market, maybe they don't get, a diesel product, they go to a gasoline or a towable. So we see buying behaviors. I think we all kind of do that even in our own households of like, what I would like something, but what can I afford? On the walk-in van side, again, I think it is still, it is one of those things where in the general economy, when we see that, if the consumer hangs in there, right, and we're stable, and then, a lot of our customers work through their right sizing, we're kind of poised to go the other way. And I'm sure what Charles said, it will probably snap back like it is, and we'll be hair on fire again, but we know that fire drill. But those days, we're looking forward to them when they do happen.
Yeah, I liked your comment, pointing out that that RVs are discretionary, and you have high interest rates, and economic uncertainty is not a recipe for $150,000 toys. So.
Or more. Yeah.
What are and maybe TJ, we'll just go right back down the other way. What are you hearing from not just your your RV customers or the dealers, but what are how are school districts thinking today compared to what they were thinking at the beginning of the year? So what's the customer sentiment? How has that changed?
Yeah, and I don't think it's changed on the overall demand profile in the replacement cycle. Certainly there's a need. Obviously, the more near-term discussion has been more specific to battery electric and plans that were in place there. So as the EPA Clean School Bus program was kind of in midstream, if you will, most of the funding was through round 3. Early on in the new administration, that was frozen, so a lot of customers were caught in the middle. That since has kind of subsided, and now there's questions on 4 and 5. So it is more of, hey, maybe I had plans to introduce or basically start a process to acquire battery electric, and maybe that's cooled off a little bit. So that's been a lot of discussion on it. There's just general things in our industry too on the mix. They're within the different products. A higher proportion of kind of special needs, and that kind of drives a different product configuration. Also, with that too, that property tax is the funding model that comes in. I don't know, but you just got mine and it didn't go down. So, happy to fund schools. We need to do that. But there are other funding mechanisms that come from the state and federal that some of those questions are up there. So at the end of the day, that's all fungible and it'll go into the calculus. But all in all, it's like, our customers need buses. So it's at the end of the day, as soon as you can get them, we'd like to have them, which is a great thing for us to hear.
All right. Thank you. Charles?
Yeah, just add on to that, not to repeat, but I think the other thing that's we're seeing is that since the pandemic era to now, it's been a significant year-over-year increases that our school bus customers have had to see. $35 breakfast is a good example of that real world today. So what that kind of translates in, if you have a school bus district that's buying every 5 years and they haven't bought something in 5 years, they're getting a little sticker shock. So if they budgeted to buy, make a number up, 100 buses, they're buying 90 buses because their budgets are somewhat constrained. Yep. So we're having those conversations, and we're trying to get in front of that and educate and translate and let's understand why the cost structure is what the cost structure is. But I think in general, it's also the battery electric discussion is changed. Round 3 was kind of out there, then it wasn't, then it is again. Round 4 is sitting there funded, but the terms are not clear yet. So that money's kind of sitting there. That could have another little support with the BEV business next year, going into next year. Beyond that, there are states. California is a good example that still has funding going with local incentives around BEV. So there's still a marketplace there. And internationally, I see we're still committed to be there. It's just going to be the adoption curve is going to look different than what we thought 12 months ago.
Okay, so I do think, yeah, this Sean made the point, and you guys both talked about discretionary income. I think one of kind of the way we view the world is everybody's going to spend everything they make, but if everything costs more, you're just not going to buy as much stuff, but you're still going to spend the same amount of money. Sean, you've been I think the trailer industry has been down a little bit longer than the heavy duty industry, which has been down longer than medium duty industry. But how has your kind of customer base's sentiment changed kind of since the beginning of the year?
It's actually quite interesting. So in January, well, let me back up for a minute. One of the most common things you hear amongst probably the public carriers is kind of wait till second half, right? We're expecting a great second half, and I'm not saying that they didn't expect a great second half, but for the past few years, it really hasn't materialized. It's been really tough to be a trucker. It's been really tough. And, sporadically we would hear leasing companies, we're expecting a better second half, maybe. This January, at the beginning of the year, that was something that there was a true level of optimism. I think there was there was evidence that things were starting to turn, the spot rate was starting to move, and for the first time, besides just hearing the public carriers say, well, better second half, we were actually hearing a collection of lease customers, like nearly every lease customer saying, we're building for a second half. We think it's gonna be really strong this year. That was January, and then I think tariffs were first announced February 4th, and yeah, that's when it stopped. So I think that's really, unfortunately, it dampened a lot of enthusiasm. And the customers that we've talked to are, it's not that they're overly pessimistic, they just don't know, because it's been so uncertain with things starting and stopping. So to plan their business, it's really, really difficult. So right now, I think if I were to sum it up, it's more of a wait and see as things start to stabilize.
Yeah, so yeah, if you said uncertainty first for this meeting. If we were doing a drinking game, we would all be loopy by the end of the next 2 days from the number of folks using the word uncertainty, and I think it's certainly appropriate, and if I have a forecast that I feel confident about at this point, it will be like Merriam-Webster's word of the year. When we get to the end of the year, and Sean, you brought up the T word, tariffs. So I know that you guys have been maybe whacked a little bit harder than most, but everybody in this room has suffered some level of higher costs, but if I'll let you take this, where you want, and we'll just go down the line again. But impact on demand, impact on supply chain, impact on pricing. If anybody wants to go there.
Okay, so tariffs. Let's talk tariffs then. Impact on demand. I think there's two fundamental things that a trucking company needs to be able to invest in equipment. Profitability and freight, and I think both seem to be rather elusive right now to the trucking companies. So this really just probably made it a little more difficult. And in terms, if you're a CFO at a trucking company or a fleet, it makes it even more difficult. I was speaking with somebody just before the panel, and as an OEM, we have the luxury of looking very narrowly and very deeply at tariffs. So we look at, selfishly, how it impacts us from a cost standpoint. And what I mean by that is we look down through our product lines at how that impacts us from an operation cost, material cost, et cetera. And then we come out with some pricing decisions because of it. Unfortunately, when you look at it from a fleet perspective, they don't look at it in full depth. They look at it very broadly, because just about everything they touch is being impacted by tariffs. So as complicated a world as it is for us as an OEM, you start to take a different perspective when you think about somebody who has to run a large fleet, a large leasing operation, et cetera, and now they have to consider the tariff impact all the way across, and now they're looking for, at least I would be looking for consistency of story, consistency of pricing, consistency of understanding across all of the different products I buy. Very, very challenging environment. Now, recently, we've got two things. So we're in the middle of an anti-dumping, countervailing duty petition against chassis coming from Mexico, Thailand, and Vietnam. I think I said that right. There was just a preliminary countervailing duty imposed, some of you in the room may know this, of 133% on chassis coming from Mexico, which is just outrageous, and that drives some decisions, right? I don't think anybody overnight is going to pay 133% duty in terms of the operating community. For the same product they had the day before, right? So it presents a real operational challenge on what to do. Just last Friday, Some of you may know there were 232 tariff decisions on derivative products. So this is outside of the normal 232. This is specifically on the material content of products coming in from, in our case, Mexico. And what was levied was 50% on dry van, refrigerated van, and flatbeds, and converter dollies. Truck bodies was not a part of that, but 50% duties on the aluminum and steel content of those products. These are very real impacts, and I can give you just kind of a sense of what that means. From an overall cost standpoint, think of it somewhere in the 6 to 8% raise on overall material. It's real money. Much like what we're seeing with many of the other tariffs out there, these are not completely being passed through. I think there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was just late last week, you might look it up. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that said nearly 65% of the tariffs that are coming in right now are being shouldered by businesses. In other words, they have not been passed through. And the article actually made the case that the reason they haven't been passed through is because it's not finalized yet. But they really did speculate that as this gets finalized, it's going to have to be passed through. And that's really where we're at. So with the recent decision on the chassis, I have no problem sharing because this is what we did. This is kind of how Hyundai works. We're pretty transparent about what we do. We actually had a 4-day notice, and what we did, we built the rest of what we had. We had actually a pretty healthy order book. We built the rest of what we had, and we closed down the line. We canceled the remaining backlog. The customers were absolutely fantastic, empathetic and sympathetic to the plight, and worked with us very well. I was very pleased about that. And we shut it down for now. You can't build something like that with that kind of tariff and absorb it. There's just no way. Relative to the van products, that decision was made last Friday. So Friday morning-ish, and they went into effect at 1 o'clock in the morning, early on Monday morning. So just after Sunday, they went into effect. So there was really no time to plan, no time to react, which is one of the challenges for tariffs, right? If you can't even plan for it or plan around it. So at this point, we have not made a decision what we're going to do. I do think we will probably not be able to absorb 100% of it. We will probably have to pass that through. And as such, like we've talked, I think the outcome of much of this is that the prices in the industry are going to go up in general because everybody's affected in one way, shape, or form by tariffs. The question at this point is just how much. If I had to guess, between some sourcing actions and some other actions we'll take, probably that 3 to 5% is what I would see going up into next year across our product line, just to keep pace. And what I mean by that is just to keep pace with what we can, because the market's already rather depressed. That being said, I think we've got, this is not something we didn't anticipate. This is not something that, and when I say we didn't anticipate, the commotion around it, we did anticipate. We kind of saw this coming, believe it or not, about 2 years ago, and started really positioning some of our planning around this. And I'll just say more to come in our response to tariffs, but that's kind of where we're at.
Charles?
Yeah, so I think tariffs has affected everyone either directly, indirectly, and in different industries, different ways. Depends on what your source of supply and where your product's made and those type of things. So relative to the marketplace in the school bus world, we dealt with a strong backlog, mostly government business, contracted business. So it becomes difficult to go out and pass that on. Because it's already a given deal. So now you're into the next one. What do you sell? What can you put in the pricing for next year, and the school bus industry's backlog was so long, your pricing product's way out there at this point. So that becomes a conversation we have to have. Fortunately, at least from my seat, we've got a big operations team that's working very hard to, what are the real tariffs, what are they going to be, estimating based on what we know, and also what can we do on the offsetting side, on the cost structure, because there's other sourcing choices or other avenues to maybe do some other offsetting. So we're not fully affecting the market as much. Ultimately, these things do get rolled into price at some point. So it is a little give and take as we navigate in the school bus space, especially with the long backlog we had, but also recognizing we're dealing with a lot of school districts that have limited budgets. Go back to my comment earlier, pricing goes up, maybe they buy less product. So we're trying to find that balance.
Yeah, maybe just to tag on to that. Yeah, I think no matter if you're making school buses or pencils, you want to know your cost as a manufacturer. And when it's a moving target, it's really hard to not only plan your business, but communicate that to a customer, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge is just the rapid changes in assumptions, right? And I shared this with the group before, but I had a meeting with our trade compliance folks, and this was kind of in the April timeframe where we were getting a lot of information on a lot of changes rapidly, and it was more on the, reciprocal tariffs. And our trade compliance folks were like, look, TJ, there are 70 countries, there are hundreds of thousands of commodities, and they all have different rates. I can't tell you what your cost is going to be with any certainty. And then it changed, on a dime. And it was funny, during that same week, we had a dealer meeting, and I was presenting, what the current rates were for tariffs that we knew at the time, and the slide was 12 hours old, and it was wrong. Yeah. And so that just kind of gives you a bit of the, the volatility to trying to plan. So, I think as we've gone from April to now, the aperture is getting more narrow. We're getting a better idea. But to Charles' point now, as we get into, all right, understanding what our costs are, first you go to work, try to mitigate it best you can, but many of these sourcing decisions have a very long tail, and they take many years to do. And they're high risk. Either it's technical, you got to test a new product, you got to validate a new supplier, so it's not a easy thing to do. So there's risk to go with that, and as you have discussions with customers, they want certainty. Like, can you tell me, hey, I just read in the news this just changed, so what does this mean to this number? And so it's kind of the bouncing ball. That's the biggest challenge here, is then having that discussion, especially Charles summed it up well, when you got a backlog in customers that are state contracts for orders already placed. It's different than probably what we see on the truck side and other parts of the business where you're pricing that going forward, so the buyer has an eyes wide open of where it is. But I think that's caused them, again, to kind of sit on their hands a little bit, saying, okay, is that going to be it? Is there more coming behind that? So I think it's more on the planning premise side of it. And yeah, obviously then as you look at your scenarios, you've got your fixed costs, your technical work you got to do to try to mitigate. So you don't want to go down a path and say, well, now we negotiated this new deal, that scenario's off the table now. You've kind of expended all this effort and cost. So it's, I think Sean put it well, and the way we took it is can't overreact, can't underreact. Once you know with certainty what the rules are, then go to work. And until that, it's really kind of hard to manage.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll turn it over to the audience and see if you all have some questions before I jump back in. And Charles, we'll start with you this time. And this is and maybe school buses is less cyclical than the heavy duty products, and less cyclical than medium, and medium is less cyclical than heavy. I think I really liked your slide where you kind of laid out the the grid of buses, medium, tractors, and vocational. It was spot on. But we're in a downturn right now, and we know that an upturn is coming, and it's getting on the accelerator and getting off the accelerator, and I guess I would preface this, senior business executives here, so not your first. Not your first cycle, but how do you manage headcounts? How do you manage supplier relationships? How do you manage investments? Just as kind of a down cycle, up cycle 101 type of question here.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, great question. So if you're expecting the demand to go up, then you want to have contingencies in place to be able that you can pull quicker than later, right? You don't want to wait. You don't want to be reacting. You want to be responding, and you want to respond to whatever market triggers you're looking at and watching. So from that perspective, it's about somewhat retaining some reserve and capacity to build, which means it affects short-term bottom line, but long-term ability to go up. It's communication strongly with your supply base so they can understand what you're looking at from a scenario planning, scenario 1, scenario 2. So you get these conversations going and you get kind of a ready, set, go mentality. But that said, there's going to be a natural ramp curve that the commercial industry can obtain no matter where the part's going, right? There's going to be that natural curve that we're all going to be going. And Harold Fire is a good example. There'll be daily meetings when that happens, but we're back in there. We know how to do that. We've done it before. It's not unusual, but it really is just planning and planning scenarios that we think is possible. And then somewhere in there is going to be the answer.
Okay, TJ?
Yeah, I think what came to mind too, kind of like how the industry has evolved as we kind of went to the COVID ramp up, where I think everybody from OEM Tier 1, Tier 2 and down said, I'm not going to put in a large amount of capacity for a pre-buy for a year and then I've got to go lay off a bunch of people. So we've got more of a water level steady state. So that makes it, these ramp ups probably a little bit more manageable, but they're still difficult when you go from a really tough one. Again, kind of the situation with school buses, it's a bit of relief. Major components that we'd be fighting over with our truck colleagues, we're very popular now in school buses, right? And which is great, again, back to being counter-cyclical. But there are other, more, I would say, product-specific suppliers that aren't used on the truck side that you got to manage. So kind of continue to communicate. I think that's certainly a spot on what Charles said there. On the investment side, right? You have to have I'd say a very principled long-term vision of where your priorities are and what you need to do to win in the marketplace. So you might have to slide things around and delay, push, but you keep momentum going. And we've all fought so hard for talented people. You want to hang on and develop and continue to do that. So it's funny. I don't know what the number is. I was talking to some colleagues last night, but just when Daimler overall, there's a huge percentage of folks that joined our team post-COVID, so they haven't been through a downturn, and it's not fun, but it's something. I guess you earn your stripes that way, right? But as we said, it'll come back, and that's at the end of the day, our customers are counting on us when they're ready to go. They're going to need those products, so we got to be ready.
Yes, that's been I think our advice when we talk to customers is like, when this turns, given that the manufacturing supply chain has been gutted, it's going to turn fast. So you don't want to think about placing your orders for very long, or you're going to be waiting a long time for your equipment. Sean?
I think I would take this a couple of different directions. On the hourly worker front. That's one of the things. So we saw chassis go from 23 into 24, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, upwards of 90% drop, something like that. I mean, it was just, there was none. But well before that, and people that were much smarter than me, they always espoused a cross-training mentality for worker flexibility so that we could be flexible in the lines. So, if you built chassis today, you could build flatbeds tomorrow, you could build vans the next day, those types of things. And that can't occur in the midst of chaos, right? That has to be something that has to be very planned, very purposeful, et cetera. So as we've managed through this, the chassis market, well, now we're at zero based on my previous comment, but, really going down like that, vans going down by almost 50%, and reefers coming down, flatbeds coming down. One of the things that we are most proud of, and our operations team is most proud of, is we've gone through this without a layoff. So somehow we've made it through without a layoff, and a lot of that is really advanced planning, making a few bets that were right on the industry, and of course you and your team and the forecasting that you do, is a big part of what we do, how we use the data to begin forecasting our operations. How are we going to manage shift patterns? Our sales and operations planning meetings are usually about 6 to 9 months out. My planning is 12 to 18 months out, looking at shift structures and people structures and other things like that. Interestingly enough, we've managed this through attrition. What's really interesting is what's happened in the Mexican economy over this same period. So we like to think, I shouldn't speak for you all, but I like to think that inflation only hits the US, but that's not really true. When you look at the Mexican economy, for example, and global economy, inflation was hitting everywhere, specifically in Mexico. And I'm talking very massive increases in minimum wage, very, very high increases in cost of living, things of that nature. And we saw turnover actually go from as high as 30% in the travel season. We lose a lot of employees to the travel and tourism industry. Today, I only have to take one glove off to count the turnover percentage, and that's annual. So our turnover percentage is right about 5%, maybe 6% on occasion at the moment. So everything worked out well, but the Mexican economy is not real strong at the moment either. So that turnover has dwindled. We're down to a core base, and I feel like we are very flexible within a certain degree to be able to react to what we need to in the coming years. And again, when we look out at 26, I think the forecasting is a huge part of that. That dialogue that we have around the forecast, when we get the monthly forecast, we unpack it, we look at it, we look at the U.S. trailer data, what is the market telling us, et cetera, and are we planning right? During the uptime, I'm a big SG&A fan of low SG&A. We tend to run very, very low SG&A. And unfortunately, as was pointed out earlier, I think this industry is feast or famine, right? You're either on your way to being very hungry, or you're on your way to being very full, and then you're hungry for, well, longer than you are full, but you know how it is. But managing through those peaker times where you're really stressing the teams that are very thin really pays off later. We have many of our people that would be categorized as SG&A who are long-time employees. It's phenomenal. But you've got to keep a longer view, and you have to prevent yourself from bloating up with SG&A during these strong times. It's very easy to do. People get tired, they get fussy, they get disengaged, they want to quit, right? Because your work-life balance gets a little out of whack. But with a little bit of planning, you can maintain that SG&A, and then during times like this, you maintain these long-tenured people who are very valuable to the organization. We all have them. You can look around and say, wow, if that individual was gone, we'd really hurt, and if that individual was gone. And unfortunately, and sometimes in situations like this, you have to make those tough calls. On the CapEx front, I'd kind of echo something that was said earlier. We slimmed down CapEx investment this year, no doubt. It's really hard to automate lines that aren't running. Well, it's easy to automate them. It's hard to financially automate them. But it doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment to invest in that. There's a time for that right before the upturn would come. But again, that's a little bit of timing. So what we have done is continued to focus on the longer term items that are going to be part of the vision. And a lot of it is around people. So I'll share two projects that are underway that seem like on the surface like they would make no sense. But when you think of the people implications of what we're doing, it makes all the sense in the world. We have an advanced R&D team that does product R&D, like many of you probably do. And they go out and they break stuff and they try stuff and they fail, and then they try again and they fail. And hopefully maybe one day they make something work, right? And you get this pipeline of ideas, and if you can just squeeze out a few good ideas, then you really have something. That's an R&D team. We have an advanced manufacturing design team who doesn't have that same luxury. They go out and they come up with great automation projects, great manufacturing ideas and projects and automation and all of these fun things, but they don't get to fail. They go right into production with them. And unfortunately, that's not a real good recipe for taking risk. That's not a real good recipe for growing. So what we're investing in, we are about 90% done. It'll open here actually in about a month, is an advanced manufacturing R&D center where we are going to take things like cobotics, robotics, automation, new processes, and actually perfect them and try them in this advanced lab where we're going to allow them to fail. We're actually going to encourage them to fail. We're going to encourage them to take risk, and we're going to bring a little bit of the fun back into their world instead of, hey, it's on the line. If you shut the line down, it's really bad things are going to happen, right? So they have a chance to do that. Our hope is that helps us attract the best and brightest in the industry, where they go, wait a minute, so I get to do this, but I can also come over here and play. The same is for our R&D engineering department. We have ventured into other areas such as technology, whether it's in areas of telematics, whether it's in various areas of sensing and camera systems and all the like. We have an iLab down at our Rosarito campus, which is it opened up a little over a year ago. It's a $25 million testing facility. It's got a road simulator and thermal bay and all these great things, but it's far away and it's not really set up for prototyping. So what we are doing, we are actually opening up an R&D prototype and ideation lab in our headquarter office. So it's going to actually be on a whole floor, and it will have rapid prototyping machines. It will have milling machines, welding, painting, anything they need, printed circuit board machines, milling machines, all that stuff. Anything that they need to ideate, mock up, and prototype some of this technology and other products that we're coming up with. Number one, it's a great thing to do, right? It's great to have show and tell, great place to bring customers, no doubt. But number two, it's so that we can attract that next generation R&D talent that we know we're going to need throughout the upturn and in a cycle in the future. We are not unlike other businesses. We have a ton of people who have never experienced this cycle, right? This is the longest upturn in history, starting since maybe 2010, I guess, is when it first started creeping up. And we've got a lot of people who are scared. They're nervous. They're worried. They don't know what to do. And I hope that the way we've gone about it has given them a little more certainty and a little more structure in the future, and a little more staying power as far as staying with us. So it's kind of how we approach it.
Well, thank you for that answer. Before I continue to ask questions, can I turn it out to the audience? Is there anyone who has a question for the panel? Okay. Well, no, we got one in the back. Got one here in the front with Joe. The back.
Oh, thanks. The gentleman on the right, when you were talking about the raise in prices that was going to get passed along, did you say 3 to 5 or 35?
Oh, good question. 3 to 5. That's what I would guess. Thank you.
Front row, middle. Yep, no, there's Debbie.
For TJ, if you could talk about the walk-in van. You mentioned down 50%. Can you talk about, how much do you think demand is down and users not buying as much from Amazon like they were in COVID recovery, or just overbuilt supply, electrification regulations kind of now being diminished? At the same time, we're seeing a lot of the electric vehicles struggling, or closing up shop or being sold. So there's a lot there, but I struggle to understand that down 50%. That's a lot.
And it's, for the part of the business that we play in, it's mainly class 5 and 6. We're not in little bit in 4, but not so much in 3. So it's the bigger package cars. And yeah, it was just oversupply. So when things were really, really hot, there was a big demand, and the parcel carriers were trying to keep up. So it kept us busy, kept the bodybuilders busy. And then as we normalized, there's just this glut of equipment. And you kind of see that too, even on the labor side and what they're doing in some of the restructuring. They're just kind of right-sizing, and it's just taking a while to get to that point. On the electric front, the customers that I talked to were, looking at the duty cycle and saying, yeah, this makes all the sense in the world, but there are many options to do that. We do natural gas, we do electric, we do diesel, we do gasoline. And on the battery electric front, it was like everybody else in the industry, let me try. I need to test, learn, understand, and see how it fits in my application. The Advanced Clean Truck regulation was a tool that many were thinking of, hey, this is where I can actually earn some credits for zero-emission vehicles that I can apply if I need internal combustion engine elsewhere in my fleet. Now that that's gone, I think that's tempered things a little bit. And I think many companies are still looking to test and try and understand, but probably not a large-scale deployment that they were thinking. It still was, there's still the challenge of infrastructure, all the structural things that we need to do with. But, for us, it's, we've been finding other business within the product line. So uniform companies, tool suppliers, some of those, they're operating in different pockets, but it's the big package carriers it's the challenge right now.
Overbuilt supply, when do you think that inventory is going to run out and it'll normalize?
Yeah, I think we're still in through definitely through 25. It's kind of the second half next year is going to be great. But I think that's kind of the view right now is we're probably, for the next at least calendar year, maybe this time next year, we start to see some green shoots on it. But it's, again, I think what I mentioned in my earlier comments, this holiday season will be an interesting view on, what's capacity to the amount of freight demand that's out there. And if, there's still a lot of equipment sitting around, then that kind of tells us.
Charles, did you have any? Do you want to add anything on to this before we go? I think we got Jeff Kaufman out here next, but
I can't add, for me,
Okay.
yeah, let's go to this question. I can't add any more.
okay.
Tap, tap. Okay, great. I'm just kind of curious. Before we went into this mess, there were a lot of secular drivers that we were talking about, whether it was drop trailers becoming important because we didn't have enough drivers. Obviously the EPA mandates have gone away on truck, but we were seeing this big explosion of final mile delivery vehicles and all kinds of things that were going to drive secular growth for the industry. I'm just curious whether we're talking trucks, heavy duty, trucks, medium, or trailers. Are those secular drivers still in place? Is that all gone? Will it come back when things get better? And lastly, when you're talking to your customers, you mentioned the next calendar year. We're probably not going to see anything till green shoots. What are your customers telling you they would need to see before they would go back to, say, a replacement demand type of order?
Who would you like to take that?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I think the drivers underlying are still there. I don't know that they're gone, but I think they're largely overshadowed by all these other things. Many have shared that they are really working to get their trailer to truck ratio back in order. I think they expanded greatly through the goods and services imbalance of COVID, and actually just did what they did to really support their shippers through that period, right, and to maintain the business. A lot of mobile warehousing, a lot of things going on. I think last time I saw, warehousing availability was up, and so now they've got kind of these extra trailers laying around that they probably need to right size, right? That they don't necessarily need them for mobile warehousing, so it'll take a little time for that to work out. I think there's a lot of things overshadowing that. What they've told us, in a nutshell, and I've talked to small carriers, medium and large, they really need that spot rate to come back. And right now they are so constrained because just like everyone else, they took on a lot of costs through this period as well. So what used to be their cost basis per mile to really be well profitable isn't the same anymore, right? Between drivers and equipment and everything else. I was sharing earlier, one of the biggest burdens I have right now, we're doing all kinds of great things with new products and new options and all those fun things, but all they do is make things even more expensive. And one of the conversations we've been having is with the same product going up and up and up, how do we somehow create some level of value for the customer? And I'm hopeful we'll crack that code here in the next 3 to 6 months. But generally speaking, I would say the demand drivers are still there. Are they as prevalent as they were? Maybe not. You know, is the final mile structure built out as far as it will go? Probably not. But I think it's probably settling more into less of an explosive demand and more of a supply and demand type scenario where you look at the ebb and flow of just that consumer buying and goods and services split in the marketplace really driving that. You know, I think all the carriers are well past ELD mandates and still in that drop and hook. And I think with the amount of warehousing there, it's just a question of right sizing trailer to tractor ratios and getting the fleets back in check, because those are mouths to feed, right? So, thank you. Great question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, obviously, freight demand is the underlying issue there to get trucks moving more. And I think part of that, there could be actually a little lag because some trucks aren't even being driven today. So there's a little bit of freight demand, a little bit of fleet utilization has to come together as well, because you know, I think those things go hand in hand as we work towards seeing what's going to happen. Then we're back into, I think, looking at those indicators, but it's going to be a two-step. You know, freight up, get utilization up, and then the production demand will start coming up.
TJ, anything to add?
Yeah, just maybe a final thought on that is just as we get from uncertain to certain or a better place, right? I think there's kind of a circular logic to that, where if there is a better understanding on the regulatory environment, that's kind of settled down. We have an understanding of, do we have inflation under control, and if that's going to unlock interest rate reductions, and then a little bit of time and momentum behind that. So it's kind of waiting for all those things to fall in place, and then it'll be hair on fire.
So uncertainty at the Federal Reserve is.
Yeah. More of that today, I understand. Yeah.
Yep. Got yes.
We can hear you, yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're starting with electronic component supplier. Question for, I would say, all three of you guys. Is there a rethink in any sourcing strategies considering rare earth, considering the rare earth materials, China export restrictions? And are there any qualities that you're looking for when you are doing these sourcing strategies?
So the question, if everybody couldn't hear, is it's Chinese export controls on rare earths, and are there strategies amongst the OEMs to not be so beholden to China?
Yeah, I'm not close enough to it as far as a sourcing strategy. What I would say is when we look at kind of a holistic approach on any sourcing, if it's battery electric, power electronics, I mean, it's something where we're kind of weighing, as Daimler globally, kind of all these constituents and all these challenges, and trying to make sure we have enough supply everywhere, and a little bit different product depending on the region as well. So there's some of that aspect where it's not one and all, but I'm not close enough in it to say we would drive that particular thing. It's obviously something that's either where you got to have access and manage the cost to it. So certainly those will drive some level of decision.
I would add to that, as part of the Trayton organization, modular strategy is kind of fundamental to how we go to market, and it varies by market globally. So you got to look at that globally. So our approach is more of a long-term approach with Billy. say, what's the market need? What options do you have? How do you de-risk supply chain? So we think about those questions. So the answer to your questions is yes, it's part of the playbook, but it varies by market and by region of the world.
I think we don't necessarily procure too much stuff in that, too many items in that vein. But what I would say is about 18 months ago, we kind of had a Czechs-it strategy just around China in general. And just seeing some of the volatility and some of the trade patterns and some of the dialogue that was or was not occurring. We saw what was and what wasn't occurring with the two countries. That kind of prompted us to really examine that about 18 months ago.
Got one more in the back.
Yeah, and this is a question probably for TJ on the RV and walk-in van and Sean on the trailer. With the capitalization changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill, are you seeing any of your customers come back to the table, or tariffs and the uncertainty there just keeping them away?
I think it's more of the latter, yeah, that certainly is the buzzword for the year. And that's kind of taking precedent. But all those things are positive, right? So I think, when they're ready to buy, that's just going to be a little bit of a tailwind to it. But I think we got to get over those other hurdles first.
I think I'd echo the same thing. We're not seeing anything quite yet. And yeah, similar sentiment. Thank you.
Okay, anything, Martin right here in the front, got Jim. Okay, so while the speaker's coming, I've got a question for you, Charles, and that is, how much pent-up demand do you think is left? If I look at the 10-year average Class 6, 7 school bus market and the 20-year average, you're kind of 36, 37,000 buses. From 20 to 24, we only averaged about 33,000 units per year. So over 5 years, that's 4,000 times 5. I come up with a kind of 20,000 units of pent-up demand.
Yeah, I think it's in the 20 to 30,000 range for sure. That's sitting there. The industry's kind of behind replacing cycles, but we are seeing school districts now, because the cost of buses are going, I'm going to go 11 years, not 10 years. There's legislation in some states where limited 10 years, they're changing to 11 years, so they're extending life of the product as well. So that's a variable to think through. That'll be a one-time reset, but the fundamental demand is still there. So 20 to 30,000 is probably a good number.
Now, if I look at that, kind of legislated maximum age on a school bus, kind of is there a kind of a rule of thumb number that?
It varies by state. New York's 10 years, and with California, you can go forever.
Okay.
So, and California's a big market, a lot of buses in California.
Okay, Martin?
I think we are now in the longest freight recession. But then part of what we've also been hearing, I think the last 2-3 years, we're hearing of potentially a soft recession, and that dissipated. But then we continue to hear that what has been sustaining the economy has been consumer spending. But then in my little mind, consumer spending should be driving freight, and freight should essentially be coming back. Maybe the biggest question that Tim and I were talking about yesterday: could this be the new normal? That the longest freight recession, we came out of the highest freight market out of COVID, and now that went away, and then we are rebalancing. What would you say? Would this be the new normal? And real fundamentals that we'll be looking at, is that freight is going to come back. That will drive, spot market back up again. There was a time we were thinking, well, the trailer market was the leading indicator. Now we've thrown that out the door because, it's not helping us now. So, what's your comment from everyone?
So a question of supply and demand, and pent-up demand and not pent-up demand. Is the cycle broken forever? And maybe what is your leading indicator? I think Sean, you said spot rates. That's
Well-
where we tend to.
Relative to the new normal, goodness, I hope not, because this would not be a very fun normal, and we would probably have way too much plant for the reality of it. It's been interesting, you know. It seems to me, and I'm not an economist. I seem to prove that every day, but it seems to me that a lot of the indicators that were kind of pre-COVID are broken. The things that we used to look at, the ISM PMI, the Composite Purchasing Managers Index, looking at manufacturing and contraction or expansion, looking at things like the inventory to sales ratios and things like that, just have not been tremendously reliable indicators. One thing that is for certain, there is too much. If you just get on your macroeconomic high horse and you look back at supply and demand, there has to be more supply that comes out of the market. And it's amazed me how long the supply and demand imbalance seems to have been in the freight market in general. You know, there were a lot of people that jumped into trucking throughout COVID, and many of them are still there. I don't quite know how that works. I've got my own theories as to why, but it sure does seem like it's taken a long time to come out of the industry, and as such, that's creating this, I'd like to think that's creating this longer freight recession on rates. And the sooner that comes out, the better. And I'll just say this on my theory, I don't think used values are helping that much in terms of getting rid of trucks, getting rid of trailers back into the market. So hopefully it's not the new normal, though. That's just my perspective.
Charles?
Yeah, I fully agree. I hope it's not the new normal either, for sure. You know, fundamentally, what was driving we have been in a freight recession, for sure. And the other parts of the economy could shore up. When you look at the details, we've been in a freight recession for quite a while. And so it's really getting the goods moving again, and gets customer confidence, getting more certainty in people's minds, both consumers and commercial buyers, getting more confidence of what to bet on. You know, when I talk to customers now, they have capital kind of ready to go. They're kind of waiting on a couple of the more green lights before they release it. So I think that's a general consensus. So I think that we will see that happening. And when, I wish we knew that answer today, but but I don't think this is the new normal. I think we're going to come out of this.
TJ, anything to?
Maybe just to kind of cap it off, I mean, at the end of the day, too many trucks chasing too little freight. Capacity it's coming down, but to that point where so many new authorities came onto the market post-COVID, and we're still kind of working through that. The used truck market, I mean, it's a bit interesting now too of what didn't happen, right? So we don't have a pre-buy, and you don't have ACT and other things that potentially could have lifted values significantly. It would have been interesting, if there was a pre-buy, then a lot of the fleets would have earned trade slots. Could have turned them into the OEMs, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to retail that used truck to somebody. So if there's no freight there, then there's nobody on the other end of that. So all of that's kind of not happened. So I'm interested as Steve talks tomorrow. But yeah, it was good to see we finally popped up the other way, which is a start, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah, we have a for-hire survey, and we've got about 40 fleets that respond every month, and one of the questions we ask is how's your driver supply? And for the last 3 years, the answer has been driver supply is pretty good. So anyway, but our very last reading was like maybe a skosh tight, but too early to tell. Jim Meal has a microphone in his hand. So for the last question for our panel.
Two questions. Question number one, are tariffs here to stay? And on the possibility that they are you engaged in any kind of conversation with your suppliers with regard to geographic relocation on those tariff impacted suppliers?
I can start with that one. It is the policy of this administration that they are, so I'm going to assume yes, in some shape, form, Yeah, and I think even if you go back to 2018 to where we are today, kind of the first rounds of tariffs in the first Trump administration, I think the industry, automotive in general, did a nice job moving away from China. But now it's more, the 232 tariffs and steel impact on derivatives. At the end of the day, steel is a market price, right? So you'll see if the economy comes roaring back, what that does with tariffs, kind of with just the local producers. At the end of the day, too, like for our business, we assemble in the U.S. It's kind of the component supplier derivatives, right? And until we get Mexico and Canada figured out what's the new USMCA, what are the carve-outs, I think then we're going to have a little bit of certainty. Until now, that's kind of the murkiness in all of this.
Yeah, to add on to that, I would agree. I think they are here to stay the way they are. I think the aperture is getting smaller. We're getting into more dimensions, so we know it becomes a cost, more of a known versus an unknown cost structure. And then you get into the normal business cycles about sourcing decisions. Make, buy, supplier A, supplier B. I think those are normal modes we get into once this cost structure is level out. So I don't see them going away, other than once they settle, we'll have a more understanding of the real cost.
Relative to tariffs being permanent, I don't think we can responsibly say that they're going to be transient or they're going to go away. So I think we are looking at them as a permanent item. In terms of supply chain strategy, sourcing strategy, alternate location manufacturing strategy, all of that is in play.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come to Columbus and share your knowledge with everyone. So everyone, please give our panelists a warm round of applause. TJ, Charles, Sean.